All right, probably past 2 o'clock. This looks like just Jason and George have added. Can y'all both hear me? The video is about 20-25 seconds behind. So if I ask a question or say something, or if you type something in there, it's about 20-25 seconds behind. So bear with me as I try to respond. But if you can hear me, please type something in the comments there. Great. We'll wait a couple more minutes, see if everyone else will log in. Hey, Emma. If you haven't logged in but you're watching, make sure you log into Google so you can add a comment to the chat. I want everybody to log in so I can know that you are here. This will count as kind of your participation for today. All right, I guess we're waiting to see if, let's see, Peter and Reed and Skylar will add in. All right, it's 2:05. We'll go ahead and get started. If the other students will log in, then they can catch up, watch the first couple minutes later. But like I said, it'll be about 20-25 seconds behind, as in I'm 20-25 seconds ahead of you. So if you have questions, type them in here. If I ask a question or whatnot, I'll pause for some questions later as well. Type in your questions into the chat over here. We'll try again with this YouTube live stream. We may move to Google Meets next week, or we may test that out and see if that is better for everybody. What YouTube Live lacks is the ability for you as the participants to be able to add audio or video or share your screen. at the same time that I'm sharing mine or speaking to you. So Google Meets is kind of like Skype if you've never used it before, but we can all meet together and have a audio and video or audio or video chat as well. So we may try that next Tuesday. I'll do some tests with that this week. Has anyone used Meet before? So I'll go ahead and type that out as well. Okay, so that might be easier, better for us. We'll see. We're going to keep with the YouTube Live. We'll try that this week again. And if it's better to do Google Meet, we may start to do Google Meets next week. Okay, great. So several of you have used Meet before. I think it's really successful, really helpful in using it to communicate back and forth. If I read. Let's see. All right, so it looks like Jason backed out somehow, but Reed joined us. So welcome to the live stream there. So like I said, add your comments to the comments here there as well. This is the week of 4/7. We'll start our weeks on Tuesdays. What I wanted to do is review what you should be working on, what to do this week, and then what we are starting for next week. So as I'm showing some things, talking about some things, if you have questions or comments, add them to the chat there. From last week in Moodle, keep up with what we post in Moodle. Mr. Cox and I both understand that this is a challenging time for everybody, especially for students, in making your own schedule, making sure you follow course deadlines and everything. Oh, hi, Jason. It looked like it cut you out as far as our participants, but you pop back in there. We understand that this is pretty challenging and it's a change for everybody. So we are willing to work with you as much as you can. If something is not flowing as well for you with this class, let us know. Send us an email, talk to us during these live chats. If you would like to have one-on-one meetings, we can do that through Google Hangouts, through email, or even through Google Meet as well, to do one-on-one meetings. We want this to be as fluent as it can be for the rest of the semester. So one thing I did want to mention is after this week, we really only have 2 more weeks of the semester, and then we are done. This is the next week of the Twine Interactive Story. Next week we'll have another project working based off of this Twine story, and then the last week we have an exercise, and then the 24th of April is when our exam for this class will be. So we'll come back next week and talk to you more about what we will be doing on that exam day. We're going to stick with the original schedule of our exam day being on the 24th, that Friday. So we're going to keep with that. We'll let you know exactly what we'll be doing that day in next week's live stream or Google Meetup, whatever we do there. So we will talk more about that later, but we don't have a whole lot more time left in this semester. So we have enough time to finish up this Twine project and do a couple other weekly exercises, and that's it. So let's finish the semester strong. We don't have too much time left. Make sure you are keeping up to date with the requirements, the activities, the exercises, the projects. You're turning them in properly. If you struggle with anything, if you have any questions, definitely let us know. Send us an email and let us know here. Whatever we can do to help you finish the semester strong, that's what we want to do. So from last week, the week of 3/31, hopefully everyone has looked through the content. You should be working on the Twine Interactive Story project. So make sure you are reviewing what is required for this project. If you go to the Dropbox, here's all the requirements. So we'll review that. Then we'll talk about a couple of the things that you should be working on, the new things that you should be doing for this week. So, two things that you are turning in for the Twine Interactive Story Project. You're going to turn in a Word file of your written out story / script. This should be a bulleted point list of all of the major things or elements of the story that's going to happen throughout your story. Just a bulleted point list. This is kind of like a pre-production document, kind of like we did the sketches for the poster project. Yeah, so there might be some lag here within the live stream read. I'm not sure, but try to pay attention as much as your stream will let you. So the first thing you're turning in for the Twine Interactive Story is a Word file written story. The second thing that you are turning in is your HTML Twine file, and I'll review how to re-download that as you finish your Twine story. Make sure you look at the requirements. So the bulleted points above that are the requirements for the Twine project. You should have a fully original non-linear story. So I don't want you to just copy a story that's already out there. You can make adjustments for that, but create a fully original story. You should have a beginning, middle, and end to your story. So that means that you should have an introduction to the characters and environment, a conflict that is being pushed upon the characters, a climax, the heightened part of the story, and a resolution. In your point of view, you're going to have multiple areas where the player is going to make choices. So underneath that, you should have 3 different branching parts. That's an area where the player can choose between at least 2 different options of what the story does next. You should then also have 2 different endings. So every branching part could lead to a different ending, but this is minimum requirements, at least 3 different branching choices for your player, and then at least 2 different endings. I don't want this to be just a text-based story, so you're going to add at least 3 different images that can be linked from the web, or that you uploaded to Google Drive and then link into Google Drive. And then you can also add colored text, colored backgrounds, bold, italicized, different fonts. Some of that was discussed last week in the videos, so we'll go back and review all of the videos for how to create things in Twine. And then the last thing is all pages should lead to another page. There should be no dead end pages. I'm going to review that here in a little bit. So as far as the project assignment for this week, make sure you review the requirements listed underneath Moodle's Twine Interactive Story. All right, so let's roll up week of 24. Back under week of 331 from last week, look at the Twine resources link. I have some examples. I have, where's my tutorial series? I think I put it on another page. I have some text-based instructional information of how to do all of the major aspects that I talk about in the video. So there's some sample code down here that you can copy and paste and edit to make it your own. Review the Twine resources. And then underneath 331, Twine Interactivity Tutorial Series on YouTube. So this is a video series that shows how to start and create interactivity within Twine. There should be 5 different videos there. So look at those options for how to get started and how to add interactivity. So if you have questions on the Twine Interactive Story, put them in the comments. We can funnel those questions as well. So a couple of the things that wanted to mention, bear with me 1 second, is from last week, the qualitative versus quantitative activity. That is due this Thursday. Okay, so the Twine Interactive Story is due on the 14th. So both your Word story script file and your HTML file are due on the 14th before 2 p.m. That's a week from today. Make sure you note the Dropbox is under week of 331 for the Twine Interactive Story. All right. So the qualitative versus quantitative activity that was assigned last Tuesday, that is due this Thursday. You're supposed to create some series of airplanes in a qualitative measure versus a quantitative measure, and then write some brief descriptions on what you learned from that. So that qualitative versus quantitative activity is due this Thursday before 2 p.m. So make sure you add your videos and your written descriptions to the Dropbox there. See if I can go find live stream here. Okay, a couple things there. Make sure you record your videos. It's a good idea to have maybe someone else hold the camera steady as you are flying your airplanes, folding your airplanes, and then make sure you write your paragraph descriptions on what you learned from the qualitative part of it versus the quantitative part of it. So go ahead and work on that. Don't forget about the activities or exercises that we will be doing as well, which will be due on Thursdays. So the Twine Project is due next Tuesday, the 14th. Qualitative versus quantitative activity is due this Thursday, the 9th. Make sure you keep up with those kind of things that we are listing for you to complete every week. All right, if you have questions on the qualitative versus quantitative as well, make sure you add those in the comments. We can answer those. So Mr. Cox just added to read through the assignment sheet for more information. Make sure you complete all of the requirements that are listed. So if you look at the qualitative versus quantitative activity, make sure you complete both phases and your descriptions as well. There's a rubric of how that's going to be graded there. So it's a fun little exercise just to practice which method is better. Should I spend more time on building better quality products? Or should I try to get as many products as I can make within that same amount of time? So we're just doing paper airplanes, which is fun to see them fly and see them move, but this same process can be applied to any project. You just scale up the project with more detail and figure out, is it better to spend more time building better quality stuff versus could we get eventually the same quality of stuff if we build more and more and more, as far as increase the quantity of that product or asset that we are building. So it is a fun project, fun little exercise to run through. Okay, so that is what we went over from last week. Twine Interactive Story, you still have one more week to work on that. Qualitative versus quantitative is due this Thursday. Any questions on those two things? Ask your questions now if you do have them. All right. All right, new content for the week of 4/7. This week, this new weekly content, we're going to continue to work on and finalize your Twine Interactive Stories. I'll show you how to complete this in a little bit after we go over everything. So several weeks ago, before we moved everything to online, I think it was like the last week in February, we tried to go to the North Carolina Natural Science Museum, downtown Raleigh, but it rained, and then the following week is I think we had spring break, and then the week after that was when we created an extended spring break or whatever it was. We weren't able to go then either, so we weren't able to actually go down to the North Carolina Natural Science Museum, the research lab there, research center. So that's not going to be a requirement, but to have a similar exercise, what I want you to do is take a look at what Mr. Cox and I want you to do. Take a look at the VR Museum Research Essay. And what I want you to go do is research VR in museums. And there's a link in this Dropbox as well. It says VR Museum Research Paper. Click on this link. And what I want you to do is choose one of these virtual reality museum exhibits. Research it, go watch some videos on it. There are a couple of links within this this link here, this URL, or you could also just say go look up this particular VR thing on YouTube and see what other people have discussed and how they experience this virtual reality experience. And I want you to see how VR is being used, not just for video games, entertainment purposes, but instead for a museum purpose, to help people that maybe can't go to this museum in real life be able to see the exhibit, to experience that thing. So what we would like you to do is research VR in a museum standpoint. Look at one particular occasion, look at some videos, understand how that experience is set up and runs, and if you have a VR capable device that can access this particular museum exhibit, then please experience it yourself as well. And then what we want you to do is write your conclusion on there. How do you think VR was successfully or not successfully used within this experience? What do you think it aided to the exhibit? What do you think it helped people that can't visit that exhibit do? How do you think they created this? So some of these are using, like this one saying the HoloLens, or the Oculus, or the HTC Vive or whatnot, or your Samsung device or mobile phone for your VR experience. So what we want you to do is try to do some research and experience as much as you can VR in a museum standpoint. If you can't physically experience it in VR, watch some videos of someone else playing through this in VR and seeing how they experience it as well. So then we want you to write a brief essay of what you took from learning about this experience. So this is the new weekly exercise for this week. This is going to be due on the 16th, next Thursday. So we're going ahead and giving this to you today so that you can have a week and 2 days to work on this. So every Tuesday we will be giving you an assignment, or telling you to complete the assignment from last week, and also giving you a new exercise or activity to work on. So make sure that you do pay attention to the two things that will be due every week. So qualitative versus quantitative is due this Thursday, and then what is due next Thursday is the VR in museum research paper. Okay, make sure you read all the specifics as far as what we're asking you to do. Take a look at the link, go learn about VR in a museum standpoint, and complete that before next Thursday. If you have any questions on that, add them to the chat or send us an email as you get to that this week as well. All right, so those are the two things you should be working on this week: VR and museum research paper, and the Twine interactive story, finalizing the Twine interactive story. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far? All right, no one has any questions. We'll go ahead and show you how to finalize the Twine interactive story. And then we'll pose any other questions we might have, and then wrap up the live stream for today. All right, I might ask a question here in the comments as well. All right, thanks, George. We will talk to you later. All right, so with Twine, I'm going to talk about how to finalize some of this. So here's the example from last week. So if I hit play, it has my background. Here's my first button, so the story continues. Here's my first option to be able to select between 3 choices. So you want to learn about these kids' day. You click on a kid's name and you go to that kid to learn about their name and their story. So then click a button to determine what Ned does today. Here's the second point where I'm allowing the player to choose between 2 or 3 options, 2 or more options. So then I can go into that one, and then here's one ending to the story. So you click on the yellow button, Ned wakes up, eats a big bowl of cereal, gets really tired, goes back to sleep. So that ends the story. What I want to make sure you do is have the option from the player standpoint to go back to the story start, so the player can go back and choose a different path and a different ending. So that is the important part here, to make sure your story is fully non-linear, to give the player an option to go back to the beginning and choose a different path. So wherever you have more than one arrow coming out of a passage like this one, I have 3 arrows coming out, that's a branching part. So then I have Ned's character and I have 3 arrows coming out of Ned's character passage. And then that's a second branching part, these 3 right here. The arrows going back from this bottom one all the way to the top is that code that allows me to go back to story start. So I have 2 different branching parts and I already have 3 different endings. Okay. So maybe with Bob, we say Bob, what do we say over here with Ned? Ned, click a button to determine what Ned does, so we'll copy that. And we'll go in here to Bob. Click a button to determine what Ned does. But we're going to change this to Bob. So Bob does today. We will copy these buttons in here as well. Copy. So we can also copy the code from one passage to the next. But what we're going to do this time is change our name. So we're going to say change this to Bob yellow button, Bob red button, Bob blue button. And then when we click off of it, that now creates 3 pages for Bob. Maybe Sally only has 2 choices, so maybe we'll do the same thing for Sally. We'll copy the section over to Sally's as well. So click the button to determine what Sally does. Maybe Sally doesn't do 3 different things. Maybe Sally only does 2 things. So we'll say Sally red button, Sally yellow button. Okay, so Sally only has two paths to choose from. Okay, so we really have 3 paths for Ned, 3 paths for Bob, 2 paths for Sally. So you can easily copy and paste these buttons. So now if I haven't finished what happens at the ending stories for Bob and Sally, but now if I say the story continues, now if I go to Bob, now Bob has the 3 buttons down here that I can choose that will go to what would be the ending points for Bob's story. If I go back and choose Sally, Sally has her 2 buttons, so Sally has 2 options to choose from. And I can go back as well. So now I have 3 choices to begin with in this first passage. So that's one branching element. Ned's page has a branching element, so that's 2 branching elements. Bob's page has a branching element, and Sally's page has a branching element. So really I have 4 different areas that give me the option for the player to choose between more than one option or choice. So you only need 3 different branching areas. I have 4 here. But what we need to do next is create some endings for Bob's story and Sally's story, and then link them back to the story start. So let me just type in some basic endings here. Bob plays on a play set, scrapes his knee, and goes to the doctor. Okay, so that'll be the end of Bob's story. Bob's one story. Bob yellow. Bob red. Bob rides his bike across town to the park. He has a fabulous time. End of story. Okay. This third one, Bob enters a pie eating contest. He wins. He earned a gift certificate to Wendy's. End of story. Okay. Sally. So Sally plays soccer in her backyard. She kicks her soccer ball over the fence and cannot get it back until tomorrow. Oh no. Okay. Sally red button. Sally wakes up but is still tired. She falls back asleep and sleeps all day long. So what the choices are should be different with each time here. So if we go back to Ned, Ned wakes up, eats a big bowl of cereal, gets really tired, falls asleep the next morning. So each one of these should have a different outcome. So these are all my different endings. You only have to have 2 different endings, but I have, let's see, 3, 6, 8 different endings here. So your story could be much more complex than this, but this is just to show an example. To tell a more engaging story with an introduction, conflict, climax, and resolution, you may want to have a couple more story arcs in here, a couple more choices, a couple more linear paths that introduce what's going on within the story. But one final thing we're going to do is link each ending that we have not finished yet to the previous story start, back to the beginning. So with Bob character, we added a Bob tag that is blue. And what that'll do is when I go click on Bob, that makes the background blue. So we talked about this last week and in the video. So what we're going to do is add a tag and call this one Bob. We'll do add and we'll make that blue just like the other one. There you go. So we'll keep adding tags to the Bob ones. Make sure it's blue. So that way it connects to all the Bob coding that we've added. And then Sally, we'll add one that says Sally. And we'll change that one to green. There you go. And this one will say Sally. Change that to green as well. There we go. So everything will kind of sync up. So Jason asks, is there a certain coding we have to use? I always have a hard time with coding. This is based off of HTML coding. If you look at like my first story one here, it is based off of HTML, CSS, which is HTML5 coding. So that's what we're going to use. You don't have to do full lines of code to learn everything. If you go back to our Moodle page and go up to the week of 331, I have some sample codes underneath Twine resources of all the major things that we can do and use to be able to build the detail for this project. So you don't have to learn HTML coding from scratch. A lot of this I've already put up here as some basis for that. Let's see. How to create a new passage button, how to change the background, how to change an image, how to add an image, how to change the font color. All of that I have as a basis. Now you can go above and beyond that and add more if you'd like to look more into coding, but you don't have to be a whiz at coding in order to do well at this project. Watch the video tutorial series I've posted up here as well, Twine Interactivity. series for how to create some of the basic interaction as well. So try not to be too overwhelmed as far as the interactivity, because a lot of the code is pretty easy to follow. So what we need to do, so keep your questions coming if you do have questions, by the way. What we need to do is take each one of these endings and then sync it up just like these three over here are with Ned, so that they go back to the story start. So I want you to do this for every ending that you have. So to do that, all we're going to do is return down, and we're going to add 2 left straight brackets. That's the key to the right of the P key. And then we're going to type in story start, or whatever you name the very top node here. So story start, and it should end that for us with 2 right straight brackets. So if you go to story start, my first node, this is the start of my story. You need to make sure you type in this properly in the final end of your story. And then that way, as you can see, it added the arrow back to story start. So what we're going to do is do the same thing here. So underneath the second Bob red button, we're going to do 2 left brackets and type in story start again. We'll let it continue. And then 2 right brackets. Give me 1 second. Okay. So every time we want the ending to go back to the story start, we're going to do 2 left brackets, and then make sure we type in the name of our story start properly, and 2 right brackets. These are the straight brackets. Okay, so actually I can take that code that I just created, copy that, and then paste that into Sally's page. Okay, that should make that page go back to the story start. So in the ending, your graph network of your interactive story should look something similar to this. You may not have this amount, you may have more passages, but at the end of the story passage should always have an arrow that goes back to story start. So that way the whole story can loop back to the beginning. So let's play and go choose one of the new ones. Let's go to the story continues. Let's go to Bob. Let's go to the blue button. And then there's my story start. So that tells me that I can go back to the beginning of the story. Okay, so now I can go to Sally. I'll choose yellow and then story start. So each one of these gives me the option to go back to the story beginning. So that's how I want you to set up the story, so that way each ending can go back to the beginning story element. So that should wrap up the project. This is just an introduction. So what you can do is make more complex images, fonts, font sizes, expand on what your story is telling. You should be developing an engaging story, so something that has an introduction, a conflict, climax, and resolution. Each choice should be meaningful and should not have the same outcome. So these are just different things that you can think about to make a more engaging story. Does anybody have any questions or other questions about how to complete the Twine project? All right, so if you have any questions, type them out there. The Twine story, you should be turning in a Word file, which is a bulleted point list of your main story elements. That's like a script almost of what your story is going to pan out to be. And an HTML file that you download from Twine. So let me show you how to do that. So downloading your Twine, after you get everything working properly, all of the links, all of the pages should lead to something else. There should be no broken images links as well, so all of your images should load properly also. But when you're ready to save this out to submit in Moodle, what I want you to do is be inside your interactive story and click on whatever you named your story in the bottom left. So if you click on that arrow, you can choose Publish to File. So when you choose Publish to File, that saves all of this coding and images and contents in an HTML file. So it says interactive test story.html, and that HTML file is what you're going to submit to Moodle. So make sure everything works. There's no broken links. All your pages work properly. And then click on the interactive story, whatever you name this, and choose Publish to File. Okay, so you can turn your Word file and your Twine HTML file. Both of that is due to the Dropbox before 2 p.m. next Tuesday. All right, that's it for the live stream today. I want to talk about kind of what you're supposed to be doing from last week, and then what the new requirements are for this week, the week of 4/7. Make sure you complete the qualitative versus quantitative activity before Thursday of this week. That's due this Thursday, the 9th. Start working on the VR Museum research essay, which is due next Thursday, the 16th. And then the Twine Interactive Stories project is due next Tuesday, the 14th. All of the times are 2 p.m. for all of our Dropboxes. So I think the live stream is working, but we can also try Google Meets next week as well. I will do some tests and get that set up and send everybody an announcement and a link for that for next week. So we'll try Google Meetup. We'll see how that will work. We'll do that next Tuesday at 2 p.m. And then we will go from there. We'll talk about the next stuff for next week. So make sure you're keeping up with the reading. We have 2 more chapters to do. We'll do chapters 6 and 7. Even if you did not complete chapter 5 from a couple of weeks ago, it is a good idea to go back and read through chapter 5, create some notes for the final exam. So we will have a written kind of open-ended question final exam that will be given to you, and that's on the reading as well as the exercises and what we've learned through our projects. So make sure you go back and keep up with your reading along with the assignments and these exercises that we're doing every week. Does anybody have any final questions before we end our stream today? All right, well, we'll wait to see if there's any other final questions. I hope everyone's staying safe and able to manage your coursework with the rest of your life and everything. Let us know how we can help. If you have any questions or concerns over the week, send Mr. Cox or myself an email. Let us know. Let's keep working hard. We only have a couple more weeks left for the semester, and then we'll finish up this spring semester. I think it's called up now to the live chat. All right, if we don't have any other questions, I will see and talk to everybody next Tuesday. We'll do a Google Meet then. We'll see how that goes. And y'all continue working on the requirements for the class and your other classes, and be safe out there. We will talk next week. Y'all have a good day.